Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez Podcast. My name is Lou Perez. If you'd like to support my work, please head over to thelouperez.locals.com and join the Lou Perez community. You'll get to listen to my podcasts and watch my sketch comedy videos before I release them to the rest of the world. You'll also have access to exclusive content for members only. And if you're looking for another way you can support me, you can do so by supporting my sponsors. Black Organic Cold Brew. Just head over to www.blvckbrew.com and use promo code LOU for free shipping. And if you're into CBD products, please check out Paloma Verde CBD. Head over to palomaverdecbd.com and use promo code LOU for 25% off purchases over $75. All right, here we go. I am very happy to be joined by the president of the Libertas Institute and the author of the Tuttle Twins, as well as the Tuttle Toddlers, Mr. Connor Boyack. Connor, thank you, brother.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit off the air about this. My apologies. I have a wicked cold right now. So normally I have no idea what I sound like because it's sort of like my nose is stuffed, my ears are stuffed. So much of my voice is just inside me. So
you sound like James Earl Jones, a nice deep voice.
Fantastic. Maybe. Oh, do you want to do that for the rest of the podcast?
Just not really.
Lower a few octaves. So I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. We were trying to work our schedules, and finally we were able to get them together. And I have a sort of a personal connection to you because I have a good friend of mine who was looking for, I guess, the perfect gift to give to my son, who's going to be turning 2 in a few months, and he's a liberty-loving guy, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to get my son a gun. So he gave me the next best thing, and that is some of the books, the Tuttle Toddlers. So
nice.
Here are 2 of them. I think we have more. They're kind of like all over the place in our house. So this one is the ABCs of Liberty. For those checking it out. And then the other one is the ABCs of Economics.
Yep.
So at this point, I think these might be a little too advanced for my son. I don't know where his if his love for liberty is there yet. He kind of has like this dependence thing. You know, he's not much of a.
He'll get over it.
Yeah. So maybe we could talk a little bit about children's books and how you got into writing those.
Yeah, I'd be happy to start there. It's
cool.
This was kind of something I stumbled into. I did not ever foresee my life taking this trajectory. A decade ago, so I was kind of a Ron Paul guy during the 2008, 2012 campaigns. I was helping out and, drinking the Kool-Aid and having a blast trying to change the world. And it's interesting, Ron, at the conclusion of the 2012 campaign, he was asked by a lot of young people what they should do next. What's the next step in the Ron Paul revolution? What now? And he would tell them all the time, he's like, I don't know. Like, this isn't like a central planning thing. You don't follow me for that reason. I don't know what you should do. And so I had an opportunity to talk to him, interview him about a year ago or so. And I reminded him of that. And I said, like, tell me about that. It's been, almost a decade since you said that. Like, looking back on that, what do you think about that advice? He's like, Connor, I'll use you as an example. He's like, I never would have thought of go start a state-based think tank, which is Libertas Institute, or go write kids books to teach them freedom. He's like, I never would have thought of that. And yet, because I was an influence on you, you're now an influence on so many other people. And I just love that, right? Because those of us who were kind of fighting for freedom back in those days, we recognized the influence of one person, right? For me, Dr. Paul was a massive intellectual influence. He is the reason I kind of got red-pilled and into the liberty movement and started reading so many other authors and getting exposed to a lot of these ideas. And so I'm a big believer in that. Well, then for me now to be in that position for other people is extremely humbling and gratifying because I know what that's like on the other side, and I know what that has been for me. So I had no vision of this, though. Like, I started Libertas Institute about a decade ago. It was like, hey, let's change laws at a state and local level. Everyone's always focused on DC, where you can basically get nothing done and it's all corrupt and awful. Like, let's focus at a more local level. And we've changed a bunch of laws. But along the way, I'm a dad of 2 kids. I wanted to talk to my kids about what the heck dad does all day. But how do you talk to a 5-year-old about fighting eminent domain? How do you talk to a 6-year-old about socialism? How do you communicate these ideas in a way where kids can understand? And I struggled. I literally went on Amazon to find books that would help me. There's books for potty training and the birds and the bees and anti-racist baby now and like all these like things other than these libertarian, freedom, classical liberal ideas. And so a buddy of mine, Elijah, who's also a dad, he and I were talking about maybe doing a kid's book. We had no vision that it would blossom into this or that the demand would be so strong, but clearly we tapped into a void in the market that so many of their parents have recognized and felt that they want help talking to their kids about these ideas too. And man, I just love it. It's every day getting emails and social media posts from parents thanking us for helping them have these tremendous substantive conversations with their kids about like how the world really works and everything. And the value that they derive from that it's like I'm a drug addict now. Like I get my dopamine fix like on the regular and I can't not do it anymore. I'm very addicted to seeing the impact that it's having with other people. And it's just an honor to be able to be a part of that for other people like Dr. Paul and others were for me.
Yeah, I wonder, obviously Ron Paul's had such a huge influence on so many people. And I'm a libertarian and a comedian. And I say, I sort of have on my resume, I've opened up for Dr. Ron Paul on a number of occasions. So it's like, if you're a true libertarian, you will have been on a showcase or something with Dr. Ron Paul. And I sometimes wonder if anyone's ever done any research, because he was an OBGYN and he delivered, countless babies. And I wonder if there's something about the babies that Ron Paul delivered that they end up going, which way they end up going. Are they all libertarians?
They better be.
I know, right? Well, I mean, talk about the success that you've had. I mean, you really found an audience, because last time I checked, your children's books, a series have sold over 2 million, right?
3.5 million.
Oh
now.
my God.
Yeah, it's
3.5 million.
This year we sold 1.7 million books just this year, in 2021 when we're recording this. So it's taken off. We've got Glenn Beck advertising the books. Just yesterday, at the time we're recording this, the Babylon Bee interviewed Elon Musk for their podcast, and we sponsored that podcast. And
wow.
So it's the word is getting out. And I mean, my goal is that I want Tuttle Twins to be a household name. I want everyone to know, who the Tuttle Twins is. Maybe they won't agree. Maybe they're, progressive or Marxist or whatever. But like, I want the Tuttle Twins to be as familiar to people as, the Wheaties, or I don't know what other, like, Pokemon or whatever brands are out there, because I want penetration into the market. I want to reach and teach every kid. And I can't do that slowly. I can't do that, haphazardly. We are being very intentional and aggressive with our marketing and partnerships, trying to blow this thing up. We have a cartoon out now. We're trying to just add a lot of value, because we want to change the world. And we recognize that the way to do that is to reach the rising generation and their parents, have these family discussions, get people thinking about these ideas. It's a long-term investment. It's a long-term play, but it's so critical that we do that, because we've been on defense for far too long. I'm sick of playing defense. I don't love trying to slow down, the death of this country and the theft from all of us. Raise taxes less a little more incremental than you were thinking. Like, no, like we got to go in the offense. We got to tear some of this stuff away. We got to try and rebuild. And I know of no better way to do that than with the Tuttle Twins, because as a guy running a think tank, trying to talk to voters and adults, and people have made up their minds by then. It's very hard to change a person's mind. Mm-hmm. It is, as we know from dictators in the past, it's comparatively very advantageous to try and reach the rising generation. We're not trying to do it like the dictators of the past by going around the parents and going into the schools and trying to, propagandize them. We're trying to get at the kids through their parents. We want whole families learning these ideas. And what we find so often, I'll end my point here, is that oftentimes the parents share kind of this value of freedom or, whatever, but they don't know what that means. They don't have any intellectual depth into these ideas. They've never read Hayek or Bastiat or, whatever. And so they feel inadequate talking to their kids about it. So they don't, which means those kids get propagandized in school and the media and their friends and TikTok and whatever. And pretty soon the kid is a little woke socialist Bernie Sanders lover. And the parents are like, where have we gone wrong? And it's like, well, you went wrong in never talking to your kids about these ideas. And it's because you felt inadequate about it. So the whole shtick with the Tuttle Twins is we want to support those parents so that they can feel adequate, so that they can feel like they have a language with which to kind of discuss these ideas. We break it down super simple. And what we find over and over and over again is parents, reach out to us like, oh my gosh, I learned more in these books than I ever learned in school. Like I've never learned that stuff before. So we're trying to reach whole families together. That's how we change the world. And that's kind of the mission that we're on.
How would you describe the Tuttle Twins as characters?
So Ethan and Emily are twins. They have a family, and they go on a bunch of adventures where they, along the way, learn the ideas of freedom, entrepreneurship, property rights, sound money, a golden rule, all the rest. And so as Ethan and Emily go learn these ideas, the young reader is kind of observing Ethan and Emily figuring it out and learning about it. So they're kind of a passive participant along the way to see how the characters learn those things, and then thereby the reader is going to learn. And so that's kind of the main play with what we do.
Yeah, for my one son, my oldest son is like I said, he's going to be 2 in a few months, and then we have a 2-month-old. And as new parents, we're trying to experiment with how do you teach your kids lessons about life, and also how to react and be among others, but do it in a way where you're not being hypocrites, like the idea. So like we're doing a peaceful parenting thing, which I don't think a lot of people are very familiar with, even hearing that. I think most parents would hear peaceful parenting and think like, oh yeah, I mean we're peaceful. For us, at least, peaceful parenting means we're not going to use corporal punishment with our kids. We're not gonna hit our kids.
That's what we've done.
And it's a thing where I remember growing up in my family, I was one of 5 boys, and you would get the old like, don't hit your brother, accompanied by a smack, and it's like, wait a minute, I can't hit my brother, but you could hit me.
Right.
So trying to remain consistent with that. And I actually, like, what was it? Oh, was it this morning? So my son, he's the one who gave me my cold, and I'm very upset with him about that. I don't think I'm ever going to get over that. So he's been like coughing and stuff in the middle of the night. So I go into the room and I stay with him. And he grabbed my nose, and this is a nose that right now it's sort of deformed with snot and all that, and it is super sensitive. He grabbed my nose so hard that it was I let out like an audible like scream, and it was something where I needed to try to let him know what he did was not okay. But I'm not going to raise my hand to him because he's a baby, and he grabbed my nose. And to be fair, I do have a big hunker, so I got to understand that. How do any of those themes come into the literature that you guys have put down?
I would say the closest we've done along these lines is the golden rule. This idea of blowback. We got 5-year-olds out there learning about blowback. You had before it was Gerald Celente and Chalmers Johnson. Who
if we talk about Ron Paul going to Giuliani and
oh yeah, that's how a lot of that got started, and that was a great debate moment. So our book talks about the cycle of violence that continues back and forth was what leads to blowback, and then everyone feels like they are the aggrieved party, I'm the victim here. And so we get into like victimhood and all that kind of stuff. So I that book is based off of Ron Paul. Like each of our children's books is quote unquote based off of an original classic book. So The Law by Bastia, I Pencil, The Creature from Jekyll Island, Economics in One Lesson, Atlas Shrugged. Like we do all these books that we turn in, like we distill their core ideas, wrap them in a fun story, beautifully illustrated, and boom, we got a book. So that's kind of the idea. And so for the Golden Rule book, I chose Dr. Paul's book, A Foreign Policy of Freedom. This is a book that's effectively a compilation of speeches that he's given on foreign policy in Congress. That book was hugely influential in my early days of, learning a lot of this stuff. So basically, we created a book where we wanted to talk about the non-aggression principle. And so we had to figure out how to talk about that in the language of, young kids. And so the Golden Rule, which is frankly kind of a corollary of the non-aggression principle, became the way that we would talk about it. This positive thing. It's not just enough to not aggress. It's, we build a better society by proactively treating people the way that we would like, us to be treated, rather than just like leave me alone to do whatever I want. It's this more like outward facing, community building, positive type of thing. And so, of course, that concept has a lot of implications. The Golden Rule is a profoundly relevant and applicable concept. I mean, there's a reason why all major religions teach it, right? I think there's an economic corollary to it. There's a parenting corollary to it. There's certainly a government application in foreign policy. So that topic, I would say, is best covered in that book. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is empower parents to draw whatever connections they want. Some parents like you might say, oh, Golden Rule. Hey, son, this is why I try and treat you. How, I don't grab your nose. And so I expect you won't, grab mine like that. But again, we're not trying to propagandize the kids. We're trying to tee up these conversations where parents can take them in different directions and different kind of applications or circumstances. We just want to foster those conversations to happen at all.
Yeah. I think one thing that's very underrated about Ron Paul is that he's kind of a cute guy. He's not like maybe I'm alone here, but like he has such a great presence, and obviously he is a literal grandfather. There's something to him that I think is very attractive in that sense. Has Ron Paul ever done any like children's books of his own or spoken to kids or anything like that? Or maybe that's something you guys can get him to do?
Well, because the short answer is no, he's not done any kids projects. He does have a project called Ron Paul Homeschool,
right?
Which is actually managed and written entirely by Gary North. It's Ron kind of lent his name to it, but he's not materially involved. But in our Golden Rule book, basing it as we did off of Ron Paul's A Foreign Policy of Freedom, we have a character in our book, which is Chief Ron. So we turned Ron Paul. So the premise is they're at summer camp and you have these like warring factions. And so that is what leads to blowback and the teaching opportunity. That teaching opportunity is done in the book by Chief Ron, who is kind of dressed in the big Native American headdress, and they kind of do these things that a lot of summer camps do. I remember in Boy Scouts, you'd have a lot of that Native Americana kind of tradition learning and culture stuff. And so Chief Ron is the guy who teaches them about the Golden Rule and the non-aggression principle and everything. So he is Ron Paul. That is the character upon which that's based. And so it's fun. We had Ron sign, people will take their copies of the Golden Rule to Ron when they see him at a conference or something and get him to sign the book. So I don't anticipate, given his age at this point, that he'll venture, away from kind of what he's doing. That I don't see him doing a kid's book or, many more books at this point. But for me, it's fun to have kind of that little collaboration and be able to honor him in that way to introduce his ideas and his work to, new generations too.
Yeah. I just did my 23andMe. I got my DNA analyzed, and I found out that I have 4.8% Indigenous American, and I had no idea. So
it's more than Elizabeth Warren.
Way more than Elizabeth Warren. So I'm wondering, should I lean into that? What does that do now for my identity?
How can you milk the system?
Yeah. Or maybe I could be a literal, I could play Chief Ron,
There you go. The live action Tuttle Twins.
Exactly. If you guys are having any book signings or stuff, plus I need work. So,
okay.
So Connor, this is a little bit of a job interview that I'm doing right now.
I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. Right on. So I think I got the pronunciation of the institute wrong from the start. I said Libertas, and it's Libertas.
Everyone says it a different way. There's like 30 pronunciations. So we say Libertas Institute.
Libertas. Okay.
The Americanized version very much is Libertas.
Okay.
Libertas or Libertas is the Roman goddess of liberty. So our Statue of Liberty, her name is Libertas. And so when I set up the Institute a decade ago, I loved the kind of torch of freedom and passing it on to one generation, lighting the way for others to follow, beckoning all to kind of, come and enjoy more prosperity and freedom. So I loved kind of that symbology and kind of the cultural meaning behind it all. But then I talked to a kind of a linguist who I was like, how would they, have pronounced Libertas? He's like, well, there's kind of two schools of thought, or kind of, it depends. And it was Libertas, or you think like in Italian, right? Libertas. Like right. You kind of got that angle, and then you got the American hick, Libertas Institute. So we don't really care. People pronounce it all kinds of ways. We just care that they know about the work that we're trying to do.
And you guys are based in, is it Utah?
We are. Yep.
Okay. And you were talking about changing laws just on the local level as opposed to going the Washington D.C. route. Yep. Was there something like a particular event that you were like, hey, this is where we need to focus our attention?
Yeah, I was on the campaign. So after first Ron Paul stuff, then I was like, all right, Constitution. Yeah, we gotta change the government. And so I got involved in a campaign here in Utah for this gentleman. I didn't know him, ended up in his living room with 5 other people. And they're all like, this is our guy. He's amazing. Let's kind of poke him with questions and whatever. And I was very impressed. He's kind of constitutional attorney and knew the Constitution in and out. And that was my frame of mind at the time. And that's Mike Lee, who we helped get the nomination in a crowded field of challengers, all trying to take down the incumbent who was running for re-election. This was right after TARP, right? The bailouts and the Tea Party wave and all that kind of stuff. So in 2010, we got Mike Lee elected, and I was still very much like, yeah, go change the federal government. And I was quickly disabused of that when seeing all this energy I put into Mike. Love Mike, has done a lot of good things, but effectively he gives speeches that you can watch on YouTube, right? Like it's very hard for a Mike Lee or for anyone, Ron Paul, right, to affect any change. The system is designed to perpetuate corruption and not positive change. And so I quickly realized that that's not where I wanted to spend my scarce resource of time. And so then I jumped over to a group called the 10th Amendment Center, which is run by Michael Bolton. Still operational. They're doing some good work. And the idea there was like working with states under the 10th Amendment, this idea of like any power is not delegated under the Constitution or, reserved for the states or the people. And so the idea was let states' rights, let's empower the states. Let's have them fight Congress and nullify laws and whatever. So I led the chapter in Utah for a while, but I felt like there were a lot of other things that needed to be worked on that fell outside of the 10th Amendment type of focus. And so I bounced around a little bit, and that's ultimately when I was like, I'm going to start my own thing and focus on all the things I think that deserve attention and where we can affect change. So that was in 2011, a decade ago.
Wow. Yeah, I remember Charles Cook, who writes for National Review. I think he might be an editor over there. He's spoken quite a bit about how sort of local issues become national headlines, where what ends up happening is you have people, outside of states sort of becoming way too interested in actually wanting to affect change in communities that have nothing to do with them whatsoever. And as fun as it might be to, see what new laws or what's happening in Nevada or Maine or like that, it's like, well, ultimately I'm in New Jersey. So, I could waste some time. But when it comes down to, what's actually going to, affect me, I need to know what my local issues are. What are some, you talked about, being able to change laws, and what are some changes that you're proud of?
Well, I mean, gosh, there's a bunch. I'll
or not proud of, if there's anything that you want to get off your chest. Right?
The most recently, our big win was we legalized medical cannabis in Utah, which no one thought we'd be able to do in a culturally conservative state dominated by, the LDS Church, and
we don't even drink coffee, right?
Yeah, let alone cannabis. Right. So, and I'm an active Mormon myself. I'm very much part of the culture and the church, but I don't believe that people should be put in jail for using a substance, even though I may personally think that they shouldn't use that substance. But we got medical cannabis legalized. We've worked on, civil asset forfeiture, fighting the ability of the government to. We've had some amazing reforms there. We've done a lot of criminal justice work. We have the nation's strongest data privacy laws that we got passed to restrict how government can snoop on you and access your digital data and everything. We just passed the country's first regulatory sandbox, which is this idea where innovative companies often run into old regulations, protectionist regulations that are designed to preserve the incumbent status quo. And, Uber and Lyft is the prime example, right? It's illegal because of the taxis. Tesla, it was illegal to sell Teslas in many states, including Utah, because the laws were designed by the car dealers and their lobbyists to say you have to go through a car dealership, whereas Tesla was direct to sell. So you have all these new business models, these new innovative ideas, and they run up against these laws and regulations. So this new program we got passed in Utah, first of its kind in the country, says that if you're an entrepreneur and you're doing something different than what a law or regulation allows, you can apply to go into the sandbox for up to 2 years. And while you're in the sandbox, once you're approved, as long as they vet that you're not doing anything that's going to jeopardize public safety or public health or whatever, if you're approved to go in the sandbox, you are shielded from that law or regulation while you're in the sandbox. So, had the law not changed, Elon Musk could say hey, I want to go in the sandbox. And for 2 years, he could sell his cars directly to Utahns. He could prove to the regulators and elected officials that there's no problem with that. There's no harm. There's no lawsuits. People like it. People want it. And so then when he's getting ready to come out of the sandbox, the legislature can say okay, let's get the law changed, because now people are going to revolt if, what they have gotten used to for a year or two is now taken away from them. And we have data. The biggest problem with elected officials is they're being lobbied by both sides, but they don't have any data. The protectionists are going to be oh, but the sky will fall if people can buy cars directly. They need a reputable car dealership and salesman who knows blah, 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 right? So they fearmonger. And so legislators oh gosh, I don't want to allow for something that can harm anyone. And then you got the innovative people on the other side that are making their claims, but there's no data because it's new. And so a sandbox is basically a beta testing opportunity where, under the supervision of regulators, these companies can have certain laws and regulations fully suspended, but then we gather data. Were there any lawsuits? Were there any harms? Were there any complaints? Are there actually any problems? And if not, let's friggin', repeal that regulation and move it out of the way so these entrepreneurs can move forward. So this is a very pro-innovation way of approaching regulation. Rather than a hammer, it's a handshake to say yeah, we want to work with you, innovative companies. Come, let's figure it out together. So Utah is now leading the way nationwide, and we're now helping states across the country adopt this model as well, so that innovative entrepreneurs don't, hit up against a wall. They have an option to move forward. So those are the kinds of things that Libertas does, really trying to actually move the needle, solve problems, help people, and change the world along the way.
Yeah. And how is what impact is that having on, new people moving to Utah?
I don't have any data on that. I will say we have a big problem. States compete against one another for business, right? You have these economic development agencies, and they try and shower companies with incentives and tax breaks and relocation bonuses. And so every state is basically out there trying to wine and dine companies to move to their state. It's corrupt. It's awkward. It's stupid. It's inefficient. It's a waste of taxpayer dollars. Because oftentimes these companies decide to relocate somewhere for maybe low energy costs, or there's local universities with a fresh, supply of high caliber talent, or it's a beautiful scenery. So they think that's going to be attractive to recruit people, or what, like there's all these other reasons. And then they're like, oh yeah, okay, we'll take the tax benefits on top, but that's not the reason they move there. Well, when we started working on the sandbox thing, we were talking to our economic development people in Utah, and they're like, oh, this is so great. We now have something we can go out and talk to other businesses about other than just tax breaks and stuff, right? We can say, like, if you're doing something innovative, you want to be in Utah because we have, this amazing program that we're going to work alongside you and support you and whatever. And so, it's a way to recruit people. I'm not doing this to like get people to move to Utah or recruit people. I'm doing this because I want this to expand, frankly, nationwide. We need a federal sandbox. I mean, the federal regulations are the biggest problem, and we need a way for suspending not just state laws and regulations, but federal ones as well. So this is something that we want to expand and have a big national impact on in the years ahead.
I forget if it was, I don't know if it was Idaho, where it was either the governor or a mayor of one of the cities in Idaho was like, hey, Californians, stop moving here, stay out. But yeah, I guess effectively, if you were able to, change things federally where innovators could basically set up shop in any state that they lived in, they felt comfortable. Well, then, you don't necessarily have to worry about as many people moving with their feet.
Yep.
Yeah. Are you from Utah originally? I've never been to Utah.
So I'm from San Diego.
Okay.
I grew up in California my whole childhood. I grew up in Santa Clara, San Jose, moved to San Diego when I was 8, spent my rest of my youth there, came to Utah for college, and then got stuck. I developed roots, and I'm glad we've landed here. It's beautiful. If you like, outdoor stuff, mountains, lakes, all kinds of adventure, skiing and snowboarding. Certainly. I mean, it's a playground of nature that's just phenomenal. And so we love it.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to the government, anytime people think about Utah, they obviously think about Mormons and all that. Is there a strong connection between Mormons and government and, how things are run, or is that just kind of just happens to be where you guys live?
I can't answer this question without a little history.
Yeah.
So, the Mormons came to Utah, the early pioneers, because they basically seceded from the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They were horribly persecuted, and a lot of they bounced around to different locales as they were trying to basically just live in peace. And the neighbors would often get pissed off because as the Mormons grew, there's a lot of immigration from European countries. They were doing a lot of missionary work. Mm-hmm. And so their numbers were rapidly growing. And so the locals got concerned because that presented political implications. Oh, if the Mormons vote as a bloc, they're going to get a Mormon mayor or a Mormon, governor or whatever. And so the locals back in kind of Wild West times, would persecute them, shoot them, tar and feather them, burn their homes. Like, it was extremely problematic. The leader of the church, Joseph Smith, and his brother were shot and killed by a mob. So you got all these people who want religious freedom. They're not experiencing it at all. And they don't know what to do, because here's this country that was predicated on, constitutionally protected freedoms, the First Amendment, et cetera, and it's not working for them. So they decide to leave. They basically emigrate to what is now Utah. It was claimed, I guess you might say, by Mexico at the time, and so they moved west. A horribly arduous, pioneer trek out west, and they again were kind of seeking religious freedom. So they set up this. I don't know what you call it. They just started, building and growing here in Utah. And later became an official territory after the Mexican-American War, and then kind of the land changed ownership. So
which side did they fight on in that?
So they fought on the side of the United States. There was what's called a Mormon battalion. So being from San Diego, there's a little museum in San Diego for the Mormon battalion, because they were the United States military came to the Mormons and begged them for help because they needed numbers. And so all these men left in the middle of this pioneer trek, and they went further south down towards what is currently the border. And they didn't end up fighting. By the time they arrived there, things had kind of ended, and so then they went home. But yeah, their heart was with the United States. They weren't like anti-United States. They viewed Congress and the president and all the elected officials as failures in upholding constitutional order, in failing to provide justice, in failing to hold their abusers accountable. So it's not that they became anti-America or anti-Constitution. If anything, it was the opposite. They were very staunchly pro-Constitution, and they just felt that no one was actually upholding it. So they came out west, and as the United States expanded west, its territories and later states, Utah wanted statehood. A lot of the people here wanted the benefits of, the camaraderie with their people and whatever. But there was big conflict with polygamy at the time. The Republican Party had been founded in part to try and eradicate polygamy. A lot of the early Mormons, not all of them, but a bunch of them were practicing polygamy. And so that was a massively controversial thing in the late 1800s. And it was very interesting.
Just so everybody knows, when you said you only have 2 kids, I figured you only have 1 wife. So I was doing the math.
Okay, good. So yeah, Utah eventually became a state, not without its controversy, significant amount of controversy. But here's the answer to your question. Utahns, the heritage of Utah, the pioneer ancestry, the early culture was very, not anti-government, but very much live in and let live. In other words, mind your own business. I actually have over here on my wall, for those, because you're sharing this video with some folks, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So for the people watching this on video, I'm going to show you. I have here on my wall, I commissioned this artwork right here, and you can see it says Mormon Creed, mind your own business. Saints, or Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, saints will observe this, all others ought to. Mind your own business. That was the motto of the early Mormons. It was very much like, we don't want we left the government. We don't want them snooping in our business. We don't want them telling us how to live. We just want religious freedom and to do what we want. And that was the ethos. That was the culture. And so Utah, even though there's been a lot of new people coming into Utah and many generations since, there is still this kind of undercurrent, if you will, of heritage and sentiment that is very libertarian. It's very live and let live. It's mind your own business. And so we kind of tap into that when possible to kind of remind people that's what made Utah unique, right? Is this kind of past where they literally went to war against the government. The troops came and tried to crush the territorial government at one point. Like it was controversial. And so it shows the abuse of power. It shows that protecting law on paper is inadequate. You need people who are actually going to enforce things that way. Just because the Constitution says something doesn't mean anything. I mean, look at the General Welfare Clause, or look at the 10th Amendment, right? Every other power not no one, the Commerce Clause, the courts have just eradicated that. So paper, who was it? I think it was Madison. Might have been I don't remember. I think it was Madison. No, it was Lysander Spooner who called the Constitution a parchment barrier. I think it was Spooner. I might be getting that wrong. Someone
he has Spooner has a great quote. I'm not going to get it right, but it's like if the Constitution can't protect itself from being aggressed against or something like that, then it's not worth it,
right?
Actually, it might be worth looking up. But
yeah, so kind of similar vein, right? It's like if this is a parchment barrier, if it's not adequately going to protect us, then we need to figure out better ways to protect our rights. Because simply saying, support the Constitution, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't accomplish anything. So that's Utah. Utah's very unique in that heritage, and our people, my people, right? I remind them of that past, that this is what government is and does. And it's not unique to the 1800s. It exists today. And for the very reasons that the early Mormons were so skeptical of power and frustrated with corruption, we should share that sentiment today because we see it in spades.
Yeah. So I found the Spooner quote, but whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either authorized such a government as we have had or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist, which is a pretty strong line. Something to point out too. I mean, Mormonism is a relatively young religion, so there is so much like when it comes to newspaper clippings and articles about your faith, whereas religions that are much older, you're dealing with archaeology versus contemporary texts and all that. How does that I don't know, but how does that work into
I might say it's the same thing about like old European countries with their aristocratic, long-term whatever families in power, et cetera, versus America, where you can read all the founding documents and read the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers and the letters between John Adams and his wife, and so it's a very American religion in that sense, right? Because it's kind of very intertwined with those early days, and so both my faith and our country share that, in that we can kind of read the source documents, if you will, and kind of be very keenly aware of why it started and why it's important. And it doesn't get so diluted down in this long-standing historical whatever full of, myth and legend and, oral history that, that telephone game where it kind of changes every time someone's talking. You can go read the original documents. And I think that's something very powerful because it makes it more potent, I think, when you can kind of go straight to the source.
So I guess part of your faith is doing missionary work. Did you do missionary work? And if
I did.
So,
I was a missionary in Honduras in 2002 and 2003. My wife served a mission in Sweden around the same time.
How did you get stuck with Honduras?
Stuck, man. I loved it.
Yeah.
I feel very fortunate. I lived and worked and served in tiny little pueblos, the most poorest, Honduras at various times has been ranked the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere. And now it's got all kinds of problems with the war on drugs and cartel and everything.
That was part of part of what I was asking. I don't know how things were at that time, but all I hear about are body counts, and it's just really
the cartels know that the gringo Mormons are poor themselves, and that the church is never going to negotiate or pay. Like, it's not like you can kidnap a gringo and make a bunch of money. So
how much is Connor worth?
Right.
Right.
So we were never bothered by the gangs. They kind of knew what we were about. And I mean, in decades past, it was always like, oh, it's the CIA, like these are the CIA guys or whatever. But no, like it wasn't a problem. The cartel stuff wasn't as bad 2 decades ago, although there were plenty of gangs and issues. But for me, it was a transformational experience because here I am working among the poorest of the poor who are happy and grateful and for what they have, what little they have. And it was very interesting for me coming from a middle-class, typical American family where I never questioned, having a meal, at the table each day. And for someone who's 20 years old and kind of going through your own growth phase, it was an amazing experience, and one I wish everyone could have. Whether it's just humanitarian service or whatever. For my kids, like I've been to Africa. I want to take my kids to this place in Africa where I went and just go do service and meet people around the world to. I remember to connect and to better understand ourselves and to appreciate what we have, as problematic as all the government crap is, to appreciate the freedoms we do have. And I don't know, it's a very kind of eye-opening experience that I love and want for others too.
Yeah. And you were there, you were proselytizing. Did you get converts? Did you get how do you judge if say your missionary work was a success?
Yeah, that's a good question. There were converts. I baptized a number of people. You can look at it from a numbers standpoint, like, hey, look, I baptized this many people, and was it worth it or whatever? For me, it's there's a lot of intangibles in terms of defining success. I mean, for me, personal growth wise, it was absolutely a success. Relationships I have to this day with people down there, learning Spanish, really figuring out for myself what I believe. Do I believe what I'm out there preaching, and really kind of putting that to the test? Having my beliefs challenged by other people who believe differently, learning how to build relationships with people who I disagree with or who disagree with me or whatever. Like, there were so many amazing things for me, and just helping. I mean, lots of service projects, building a house for someone who's, hurricanes swept their home away. Like, it was very much a success. And even if I baptized, like, I don't think my wife baptized anyone in Sweden and some of the Scandinavian countries. It's, very secular, very difficult for any Christian missionary. Yeah. And so success is different, right? And you measure it in a different way. But for me, it's like with the Tuttle Twins, so doing Tuttle Twins through a nonprofit, we raise a lot of money for it. We fundraise for a lot of the projects that we do to get them off the ground and market them even more. And so when you talk to donors, a lot of the donors, especially foundations and more professional, philanthropists, they want measurements. They want to know, what are your outputs going to be, and what are your outcomes, and how do you measure success? Kind of like what you're asking. And what I say with the Tuttle Twins, I guess, would be the same answer as, being a missionary. I consider myself a missionary for freedom now. And that is, like, I envision myself as friggin' Johnny Appleseed in the countryside, just throwing seeds out, right? I don't know what's going to grow. I don't know what's, going to stick, but I know that we've got to plant a lot of seeds. What keeps me up at night? What keeps me up at night is not marketing the Tuttle Twins hard enough and reaching enough people where I'm going to miss the next Ron Paul. Like, who's the next, just to use him as an example, right? But who's the next, like, change agent that's going to make our world a better place, that unless I reach him, he's not going to come into our movement and be on the right path or whatever. Or maybe he will be, but it'll be delayed 30 years, or whatever. But, like, for me, it's finding those diamonds in the rough and knowing that the more seeds I plant, the more I reach out. I don't know every family's dynamic and, what they consider success, but I know that my responsibility is to spread these seeds far and wide, and then let other people go, fertilize them and harvest them and hope for a better future.
Yeah, I was definitely seeing a connection there between your missionary work and the work that you're doing now. When it comes to, planting those seeds, you often hear about kids rebelling against their parents. So, if your parents are conservative, your kid, it might end up, being, liberal or progressive, or, rebelling. Have you found, is that necessarily the case? Because I'm trying to look back at the way that I was growing up. Because my parents were, lifelong Democrats, but my father was also an immigrant and a business owner. So it's sort of, he sees, he's a blue collar butcher. So he saw, sort of that, working class element as opposed, so yeah, I'm wondering, like, maybe that Ron Paul, is out there, but I don't know which family he necessarily has to be brought up by,
Right. Well, that's a very interesting question, because, it's this idea that, like, can you reach kids directly, or do you go through the parents? So, I said earlier that we're not trying to propagandize kids and go around the parents and, go in the classroom, but it's also that, like, there's some parents who are wrong, who are ignorant, who are distracted, busy, not going to do this. And so it's like, if I want to reach as many kids as possible, I kind of have to be open to appropriate strategies to reach more kids whose parents aren't buying our books. So getting these books into schools, we just launched a Tuttle Twins cartoon a few months ago, an animated series. We got 5 episodes out now. They're hilarious and amazing.
Where can we see them?
TuttleTwinsTV.com is where you can. So the books are all at TuttleTwins.com. And the series is at TuttleTwinsTV.com. So the idea is, like, Saturday morning cartoon, right? That like kids are talking to their friends and, oh, have you seen the Tuttle Twins? No, I haven't. Like, my kids watch all kinds of YouTube channels that I've never heard of. They get it from their friends. And so getting into that and percolating that out, like, again, yeah, like, I want to reach as many people as possible. So I can't constrain myself based just off of like-minded parents buying the books for their kids. I need to think bigger than that. We need to reach more people than that. And so I don't want to do it in an inappropriate way. I'm not trying to hide what we're doing, but we have to be very creative about how to reach, the rising generation in a very aggressive and substantive way if we're going to make a dent in improving the future.
And also do it in a way where, I mean, you talked about, economics in one lesson and the bibliography of Ron Paul. It's like taking those ideas, working on it so that it could work for a younger audience, but also be entertaining too. So you're sort of juggling all of those things. And I just got to say, I'm definitely going to be checking out the cartoon because my oldest son is absolutely addicted to Thomas the Tank Engine. And I don't know about you guys out there, but in the opening credits, we're told that Thomas is the cheeky one, but he's not the cheeky one. He's not cheeky at all. He's kind of a little bitch. And so hopefully the Tuttle Twins can fill a void in my family's
nice
watching. Connor, thank you so much for taking the time. And where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, so TuttleTwins.com is the place to go. We got a pretty sweet offer going right now on the homepage. If you don't have the books, it's a great time to pick them up. We provide workbooks as well. Like, you're going to get an awesome bundle. You can find them on Amazon as well, but you get a way better deal at TuttleTwins.com.
Great. And hopefully the next time everybody hears me, my cold will be lifted.
Thank you so much for watching and or listening to my podcast. If you'd like to support my work, please head over to thelouperez.locals.com and join the Lou Perez community. And another way to support me is by supporting my sponsors. Black Organic Cold Brew. Head over to www.blvckbrew.com. Use promo code LOU for free shipping. And if you're into CBD products, please check out palomaverdecbd.com. Use promo code LOU for 25% off purchases over $75. All right. Bye.